Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking a topic that feels like it is aimed directly at the heart of the whole, the Silicon Valley mythology.
Oh yeah, the social network movie version of building a startup.
Exactly. I think we all have this cinematic montage version in our heads.
Yeah.
You have a brilliant idea for a new app or a revolutionary marketplace.
Yeah.
You and your co-founder spend 6 months in a dark garage.
Fueled entirely by caffeine and cold pizza.
Right. You are coding away. You design a sleek logo. You build this beautiful, flawless user interface. And then the big day finally arrives, launch day. You press the go button, and it is like flipping a massive breaker switch in a skyscraper.
The lights all turn on at once.
The servers hum to life. The user graph immediately goes up and to the right, and suddenly you are the next unicorn.
It is a incredibly compelling narrative. It is dramatic. It is exciting. And it is almost entirely fiction.
Yeah, that is the hard truth we are dealing with today. Because for honestly, 99.9% of people who build a platform, they flip that switch and nothing happens. The room is completely empty. It is just dead silence.
And that silence is exactly what we are here to talk about today. It is what our source material by Inder Chen calls the cold start problem. And frankly, it is where most really great ideas go to die. We are diving into the key takeaways from his work today, exploring why starting a network is fundamentally different and significantly harder than starting a traditional business.
And just to establish the credentials here before we get too deep, because there are a lot of so-called growth hackers out there peddling advice. Yeah. Andrew Chen isn't just theorizing from the sidelines, right?
No, not at all. That is why this source material is so authoritative. He is currently a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz, which is, one of the biggest venture capital firms in the game.
A massive player.
Right. But before he was writing checks, he was leading the writer growth teams at Uber. So he was actually in the trenches during one of the most aggressive scaling periods in tech history. He has seen this cold start problem from the inside of a literal rocket ship, and he has seen it from the perspective of an investor who has to watch countless companies fail to launch.
So let's get right into the mechanics of this. We hear the term cold start, and it sounds like a car engine on a freezing morning. But in the context of a tech product, what is the actual definition? What is the core conflict here?
Well, the conflict is basically a paradox. It is a circular dilemma. Let us imagine you and I decide today to launch a brand new competitor to Zoom. We build an objectively better video chat app. It has higher resolution, it has better sound, it has cool filters.
Okay, I am sold. It is a strictly better product.
Right. But here's the problem. If you sign up and you download it and none of your colleagues are on the platform yet, who do you call?
Nobody. I just sit there and stare at myself in high definition.
Exactly. The product has absolutely zero utility to you because the utility is entirely dependent on the presence of other people. This is the definition of the cold start problem. You need users to create value, but users will not join a platform that has no value.
It is a classic chicken and egg problem, but with millions of venture capital dollars burning a hole in your pocket.
Precisely. And you have to understand, this is very different from a traditional business model. If I open a shoe store on Main Street and I am the only person in the store, I still have shoes. If one customer walks in, they can buy a shoe. The value exists completely independently of whether other customers are in the store or not.
Right. The shoe keeps your foot warm regardless of who else is shopping.
Exactly. But in a network, whether we are talking about Slack or Uber or Tinder, the product actually is the other people. Without them, you do not have a product at all. You just have a bunch of empty code.
So the mission of our deep dive today is not just to sit here and admire how difficult this is. We really want to uncover the playbook for solving it. How do you bridge that massive gap from zero users to well enough users?
And enough is definitely the key word there. Our source uses the term critical mass. That is the holy grail. It is the tipping point where the network finally starts to grow on its own because the value has become obvious to everyone. Our goal today is to walk you through these specific stages, the cold start, the tipping point, and then what happens when you actually win, which is called the moat.
Let us start with the engine itself then. We cannot talk about the cold start without talking about network effects. I feel like this is a buzzword that gets thrown around in basically every pitch deck in the world. Oh, we have great network effects. But what does it actually mean in practice?
It is wildly overused, and frankly, it is often misused. A lot of people confuse virality with network effects, and they are absolutely not the same thing.
Wait, let's pause right there. I think I, and probably a lot of our listeners, totally conflate those two things. If a ton of people are sharing my app, isn't that a network effect?
Not necessarily, no. Virality is entirely about the speed of acquisition. It means people are actively inviting their friends, so you're acquiring new users very cheaply, and that is great. But network effects are about value and retention. A true network effect exists when the product itself becomes more valuable to me personally as more people start using it.
Give me a really concrete example of the difference between the two.
Okay, think about a viral YouTube video, a funny cat video or something. It spreads incredibly fast. It gets millions of views in a single day. That is virality. But does my actual experience of watching that video improve just because you also watched it?
No, the video is exactly the same video.
Exactly. That is virality without any network effects. Now look at the invention of the telephone or an app like WhatsApp. If I am the only person on Earth with the app, it is entirely useless. If you join, it gets a little better. If our entire work team joins, it suddenly becomes essential. The value scales upward with the user base. That is a network effect.
Yep.
It creates a sort of lock-in because leaving the platform becomes expensive for the user. You lose all those connections.
Okay, that distinction is really crucial. Virality gets people in the door, but network effects are what keeps them there.
Perfectly put.
The source material breaks down network effects into 3 distinct flavors. I want to walk through these because I think founders often pick the wrong growth strategy simply because they do not know which type of network they are actually building.
Absolutely. The strategy for one type definitely does not work for the others.
The first one listed is direct network effects. This seems like the simplest one to wrap our heads around.
It is definitely the most intuitive. This is the telephone example we just used, or a platform like Facebook. The value increases directly as the number of nodes, meaning the users, increases. It is what we call a same-side network. Everyone on the platform is essentially the exact same type of user. They're just a person looking to connect with another person.
So if I am building a direct social network, my primary goal is really just get everyone in the exact same room.
Yes. The connections are strictly user to user.
But then we have indirect network effects. This feels a bit more abstract. The source mentions smartphones and operating systems as the prime examples here.
Right. This is often called a two-sided or platform dynamic, but the value is indirect. Think about when the iPhone first launched. The hardware was really cool, obviously, but what really locked people in long-term?
The App Store, the apps.
Right. But Apple does not personally make most of those apps. Independent developers do. So here's the chain reaction. More iPhone users attracts more developers to the platform. More developers build better and more diverse apps. Those better apps make the iPhone much more valuable to the end users, so more users go out and buy iPhones.
It is a loop, but it has an intermediary layer. The users are not generally talking to the developers directly. They are using the product that the developers created, which in turn enhances the overall platform.
Exactly. It is a symbiotic relationship between hardware and software, or between a platform and the content on it. If you are building an operating system, you do not just need a bunch of users. You need to foster an entire ecosystem.
And the third flavor, and this is the one that our source Andrew Chen really lives and breathes, is marketplace network effects.
This is your Uber, your Airbnb, your eBay model. It is strictly two-sided. Buyers and sellers, writers and drivers, hosts and guests.
This honestly seems like the absolute hardest one to pull off because you are dealing with 2 completely different groups of people who want entirely different things.
It is incredibly difficult. It relies on what we call bidirectional value. In a direct network like Facebook, I actively want my friends to join. In a marketplace, if I am a buyer, say I'm looking for a rare vintage comic book on eBay, I actually do not want other buyers to join the platform.
Right. They are your direct competition. They are going to bid against you and drive the price up.
Exactly. This is the crucial nuance. In a marketplace, same-side growth can actually be a negative experience. I do not want more riders on Uber if there are not enough cars on the road. It just creates horrible surge pricing and massive delays. I want more drivers. The network effect crosses the aisle. Buyers want sellers and sellers want buyers.
So if you are launching a marketplace, you are not really launching one company. You are essentially launching 2 companies simultaneously and trying to force them to meet in the middle.
And that brings us right back to the cold start problem. How do you get the drivers if there are absolutely no riders? And how do you convince the riders to open the app if there are no drivers available?
That is the perfect segue we need. We have clearly defined the engine. Now, how do we actually ignite it? The Force uses the analogy of igniting the fuse of a rocket. I really like that visual because it implies that it is a manual, dangerous process, and it requires a very specific spark. It does not just happen naturally.
The book is very clear on this point. The solution to the cold start problem is not big bang marketing. You do not just go out and buy a Super Bowl ad and hope for the best.
Why not, though? I mean, if I have the VC money, why cannot I just brute force it and buy the users?
Because of the leaky bucket problem. Without the underlying network density, the product has zero value. You can pay $10 million to get 1 million users to download your shiny new app on a Tuesday. But if they open it and see a completely empty feed, or no drivers nearby, or no dates to swipe on, they will delete it on Wednesday. You have not built a network. You have just temporarily rented some traffic.
So if throwing money at marketing is not the answer, what is? The source introduces a concept called the atomic network. This honestly seems like the most important foundational concept in the whole discussion.
It absolutely is the fundamental unit of growth. An atomic network is basically the smallest possible group of users required for the network to be stable and actually valuable.
Let us break that down a bit more. What does an atomic network look like for something simple like Zoom?
For Zoom, the atomic network is literally just 2 people, just you and me. If we both have the software, it works perfectly. That is a huge part of why Zoom grew so incredibly fast. The barrier to entry was tiny.
But for something a bit more complex like Slack.
A bit larger, Slack really needs a team to function, maybe 5 to 10 people working together. If I am on Slack by myself, it is basically just an overly complicated notepad. If the whole marketing department is on that DAR, it is a vibrant, collaborative workspace.
And for Uber.
Much larger. And strictly geographically constrained, Uber's atomic network is not 1,000 drivers spread across the country. It is maybe 10 specific drivers active in downtown San Francisco right at 5 p.m.
Which leads us directly to the first major tactic in the playbook for getting those first users, the niche market strategy.
Correct. And this is exactly where a lot of founders get really scared. Investors always want to hear about the total addressable market. They want to pitch about global domination. But the argument here is that to actually conquer the world, you have to start by conquering a tiny, seemingly insignificant island first.
Because if you spread your first 1,000 users evenly across the entire United States, literally nobody gets a ride. But if you put all 1,000 of them in 3 square miles, everyone gets a ride in 2 minutes.
Exactly. Density is vastly more important than overall size in the beginning.
The classic case study everyone points to here is Airbnb. We all know them as this massive global giant now. But the source material takes us way back to their very beginning. They did not launch globally. They did not even launch nationally.
No, they launched in just one city, San Francisco. But honestly, even San Francisco was too big of a target. They actually launched for one very specific event.
It was a design conference, right?
Yes. There was a major design conference coming to town. All the local hotels were completely sold out. The founders knew there was a massive supply and demand crunch happening for that specific weekend, so they targeted that exact niche. Designers coming to San Francisco for a few days who needed a place to crash.
Why designers, though? Was that just an accidental coincidence?
It was actually brilliant strategy, whether intentional or not. Designers tend to have good taste. They take good photos of the places they stay. They generally respect other people's property. By artificially seeding the initial network with designers, they effectively set a high-quality cultural tone for the entire platform. They ensured the early listings looked beautiful. If they had targeted, say, massive groups of spring breakers in Florida, the platform would have developed a completely different vibe, and it might never have taken off the way it did.
So they basically created an artificial atomic network that existed for just one weekend. And because it worked, those specific users had a great experience.
And then they went home to their own cities and told their friends. Then Airbnb replicated that exact strategy. They went to the next major conference in a different city, then the next one. They essentially built this massive global network by meticulously stitching together hundreds of little local atomic networks.
It feels a lot like playing the board game Risk. You do not just throw all your RNEs at Asia on the first turn. You secure Australia. It is small, it is highly defensible, and you can slowly build your armies there before expanding out.
That is a perfect analogy. You secure the small niche, you prove the value concept definitively, and only then do you expand.
But there is a piece of this early story that I really want to drill into. It is about how they actually got those very first users to participate. It was not just brilliantly picking a niche, it was sheer hustle. The source talks extensively about doing things that do not scale.
This is the bootstrapping phase, or what some in the industry call flintstoning.
Flintstoning.
Yeah.
Like the cartoon car powered by the guy's feet.
Exactly like that. From the outside looking in, the car looks like it is cruising along under engine power. But underneath the floorboards, the founders are running barefoot, just pedaling as hard as they possibly can to keep it moving.
I have heard this story, and several listeners actually asked about this, that the Airbnb founders were so strapped for cash during this phase that they were literally selling breakfast cereal.
Yeah, it is a famous story now. This was right during the 2008 presidential election. They designed these custom political cereal boxes, Obama O's and Captain McCain's. They bought cheap cereal. They glued the cardboard boxes together by hand in their apartment, and they sold them as limited edition collector's items just to get enough cash to keep the website servers running.
That is the ultimate definition of an unscalable activity.
But it perfectly illustrates the required mindset. In the cold start phase, you have to do whatever it takes. You do not have a sophisticated algorithm yet. You do not have any brand recognition. You literally have to manufacture the activity with your bare hands.
Another key tactic the source mentions for this initial phase is incentivizing the hard side of the network.
Right, so every network inherently has an easy side and a hard side. In a marketplace model, the hard side is almost always the supply side, the drivers, the hosts, the content creators. The easy side is the consumer who just wants to push a button.
Why is the supply side universally harder to acquire?
Because they actually have to do work. Being an Uber driver is a literal job. Being a successful YouTuber takes hours and hours of editing and production. Sitting on your couch watching a video or taking a ride in a car is very easy. So as a founder, you have to disproportionately focus your energy and your capital on acquiring and keeping the hard side.
So you basically have to subsidize them.
You bribe them honestly. You guarantee their income. Uber famously paid drivers a guaranteed hourly rate just to sit in their cars in downtown San Francisco, even if they did not get a single ride request all day. They had to guarantee absolute reliability for the early riders, so they simply paid the drivers to be idle and available.
They bought the initial market liquidity outright.
Exactly. They artificially manufactured that first atomic network with cold, hard cash until the organic consumer demand could finally catch up.
It totally reminds me of the classic nightclub promoter strategy. You let the cool people in for free and maybe give them free drinks. Because if they are hanging out there, the rest of the crowd will happily pay a cover charge just to get in the door.
That is quite literally a network effect business model in action. The hard side in that specific context gets heavily subsidized because they bring the intrinsic value that attracts the easy side, the paying customers.
Okay, so we have hustled. We have hand-glued the cereal boxes. We have paid drivers to sit in empty parking lots. We have secured our first atomic network in a tight niche market. The fuse is finally lit. The rocket is starting to shake.
Right, but now the nature of the problem completely changes. You absolutely cannot hand glue cereal boxes for 1 million users. The sheer hustle just does not scale anymore.
This is a major pivot point in our deep dive today. This is where we move from the art of the hustle to the actual science of growth.
Yes, you have to aggressively transition from founder intuition and brute force to hard data and analytics. You simply cannot manage a highly complex growing network with a handshake and a gut feeling.
The source material outlines a very specific dashboard of metrics you need to watch. And I want to be careful here not to just sit and rattle off a bunch of corporate acronyms. We hear things like LTV, CAC, churn all the time. But how do these metrics interact specifically within a network effect business?
It is entirely about the dynamic relationship between them. Let us start with the really big one, CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. In a normal, traditional business, as you get bigger, your CAC almost always goes up. You quickly run out of the easy early adopters, and you have to start paying more and more in marketing to find that next marginal customer.
Right. You have tapped out your warm leads, essentially.
But in a true network effect business, the magic is that your CAC should theoretically go down over time.
Because the viral loop starts doing the work for you.
Yes. If the product legitimately becomes better because more people are on it, your existing users essentially become your unpaid sales force. They naturally invite their friends. So your blended CAC, the average cost across all users, starts to drop significantly.
Okay, so if I am a startup founder looking at my analytics dashboard and my customer acquisition cost is steadily rising month over month, that is a massive red flag. It means my network effect is not actually kicking in.
Exactly. It means you are just running a traditional paid marketing funnel. You are buying users, but you are not actually building a self-sustaining network.
Now let us look at the other side of that equation, LTV, or lifetime value.
In a standard linear business, LTV is usually pretty flat or even degrades over time as users slowly get bored of the product. But in a network effect business, the LTV should ideally increase over time.
And why is that exactly?
Because of that lock-in effect we talked about earlier. The longer I use a platform like Facebook, the more photos I have uploaded there, the more friends I am deeply connected to. Leaving the platform becomes emotionally and socially painful. The switching cost goes way up, so I stay on the platform much longer and I generate vastly more value for the company over my lifetime.
So the golden chart, the visual mental model we should all have in our heads, is a big X. The cost to acquire a user goes down, and the value of that user goes up over time. And that expanding gap between those two lines is your profit margin.
That is the tipping point visualized perfectly. When those two lines cross and start to diverge rapidly, you have finally reached critical mass.
But there is a very dangerous metric that can silently kill this whole beautiful equation: churn.
Ah, churn, the silent killer of startups. Churn is simply the percentage of people who are abandoning your platform every month.
I feel like churn is obviously bad for literally any business. But why is it considered so much worse for a network-based business?
Because in a network, a user leaving does not just mean you lost a little bit of monthly revenue. It means you actually lost a piece of your core product. If 10% of the drivers leave Uber today, the wait times immediately go up for all the remaining riders. So because the service is worse, the riders start leaving, which means the remaining drivers get fewer fares and make less money. So then even more drivers leave.
Wow, it is a reverse network effect. It is a complete death spiral.
Exactly. Negative churn loops can destroy a massive network vastly faster than you could ever build it. You absolutely have to plug the holes in the bottom of the leaky bucket before you turn the marketing hose on full blast.
The source material heavily suggests using cohort analysis to track this specific issue. What does it actually mean in plain English for, someone not deeply in data science?
It basically means tracking distinct groups of users based on exactly when they joined. You look at the class of January, for example, and you track to see how many of them are still actively using the app in June. Then you compare that to the class of February. If the newer classes are staying longer and engaging more than the older classes, it proves your network effect is actually working. The product is fundamentally getting stickier as it grows.
And if the newer classes are leaving faster than the old ones?
You have a very serious structural problem. Your product is actually getting worse as it gets bigger, which means the wheels are falling off.
Which brings us nicely to the concept of the moat. We have built the atomic network, we have scaled it, we are tracking all the data. But how do we actually defend this thing from competitors? The source places a truly massive emphasis on community here.
This is super interesting because community is so often dismissed by hardline tech folks as just soft stuff. Oh, let us just hire a junior community manager to post some funny memes on social media. But Andrew Chen forcefully argues that a genuine community is a hard defensible strategic asset.
Why is it considered a moat, though?
Because pure technology is entirely commoditized now. If you have a team of great engineers and you build a really cool new feature, let us use Snapchat stories as an example. A giant like Instagram can easily reverse engineer and copy it in about 3 months, and they did exactly that.
Ruthlessly and very successfully.
But you absolutely cannot copy and paste a community. You cannot steal the interpersonal relationships, the deep inside jokes, the shared culture, the underlying trust between users. That is the actual glue that holds the moat together.
So how do you actually go about building that? It is clearly not just writing lines of code.
It is entirely about creating intentional growth loops rather than traditional marketing funnels.
Explain the difference there, a funnel versus a loop.
Okay, so a funnel has a very defined start and end point. You pour money into the top in the form of Facebook ads or whatever. A user filters down through the steps and pops out the bottom. That user maybe buys something and then the whole process just ends. To get another user, you have to go back to the top and pay more money.
It is a strictly linear transaction.
Exactly. But a loop is circular and self-feeding. A user joins the platform, they engage with the core product. That specific engagement creates a tangible output. Maybe they share a photo, or they send an invite code to a friend, or they write a really helpful review. That output naturally attracts a brand new user to the platform, who then engages and creates their own output.
The natural output of one cycle becomes the free input for the next cycle.
Yes. It endlessly reinvests its own kinetic energy. The source mentions Dropbox as the ultimate classic example of this. You sign up for free, and then you invite a friend specifically so you can earn more free storage space. Your friend joins, gets their own free space, and then they are incentivized to invite another friend. The product itself structurally generates its own marketing momentum.
And the community aspect basically acts as the heavy lubricant for this growth loop.
It acts as the deep anchor. The source suggests highly specific tactics like organizing local user meetups, building robust online forums, and publicly recognizing your power users. When users feel like they genuinely belong to a specific tribe, they voluntarily become fierce defenders of the brand. They will sit on forums and answer technical questions for new users for free. They will moderate toxic content. They essentially do the heavy lifting for you.
I have definitely seen this firsthand with complex software developer tools. The best technical documentation is very often written by the passionate users on forums, not by the company's actual employees.
Exactly. That is a massive unassailable moat. A well-funded competitor can easily copy your software code over a weekend, but they absolutely cannot force thousands of passionate people to write extensive documentation for them for free. That kind of loyalty has to be earned over years.
So we have extensively covered the cold start, the rocket ship scaling phase, and building the moat. Now we really have to talk about the final boss of this whole journey, scaling.
The really, really long game.
You would naturally think that once you are a massive billion-dollar company, you are finally safe.
Yeah.
You have the network effect, you have the total lock-in, you have won. But the source explicitly says this is exactly where entirely new, terrifying monsters start to appear.
It is what they call the challenge of success. Think about it. When your platform is very small, everyone in the network is a passionate early adopter. They're deeply excited to be there. They're generally well-behaved. The overall quality of interaction is incredibly high.
It is like a really cozy invite-only cocktail party.
Exactly. But when you successfully scale to millions of users, the doors are basically blown wide open. Absolutely everyone comes pouring in. The spammers arrive, the political trolls, the financial scammers, and just a massive wave of people who simply do not understand the original culture of the platform.
The classic eternal September problem.
Yes. The critical signal-to-noise ratio completely plummets. If I join a massive global network today and literally all I see in my feed is crypto spam or completely irrelevant garbage content, the actual value of that network for me personally drops to absolute zero, even if there are a billion other people on it.
So the supposedly invincible network effect can actually run in reverse at scale. More users suddenly equals a much worse experience.
Yes. We formally call this network congestion or context collapse. It is incredibly dangerous.
So how do the massive giants actually survive this phase? I mean, Facebook has billions of active users. How is the entire platform not just a complete burning garbage dump by now?
Well, some critics would definitely argue that it is a garbage dump.
Fair point.
But the actual engineering answer to your question is algorithmic curation.
This is essentially the savior of the massively scaled network.
It absolutely has to be. At that massive scale, you can no longer just show a simple chronological feed of everything happening. It is way too much raw data. It is overwhelming. You have to use incredibly sophisticated machine learning algorithms to fiercely curate the user experience. You have to accurately predict and show the user the 10 specific things they actually care about today and quietly hide the 10 million things they definitely do not care about.
So the algorithm's entire job is to essentially make the massive, overwhelming network feel small and highly intimate again.
That is the ultimate goal. Yes, look at TikTok. They are arguably the modern master of this exact dynamic. They have over 1 billion global users, but when you open the app, your For You page feels like it was meticulously handpicked by someone who intimately knows your specific weird hyper-niche interests. That is exactly how you maintain the illusion of a tight network effect at massive global scale. You use heavy data analysis to aggressively filter out the noise.
The source material also heavily points to continuous innovation as a strict requirement for surviving the scaling phase. You apparently cannot just keep iterating on the exact same core product forever.
No, you really cannot. The market evolves too fast. You have to start strategically layering entirely new separate networks on top of the massive one you already built. Look closely at Uber's trajectory. They originally started with just black cars for wealthy professionals. Then once that was stable, they added UberX, which was the peer-to-peer model. Then they eventually added Uber Eats for food delivery.
They basically leveraged their massive existing supply side of idle drivers to forcibly launch a completely new secondary network from scratch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They brilliantly used the overwhelming strength of their first mature network to completely bypass the cold start problem for their second network. They could just send a push notification saying, hey, drivers, you were already out driving around anyway. Do you want to pick up a few burritos and deliver them for extra cash? Boom. Instant, massive market liquidity for Uber Eats overnight.
That is honestly genius. You completely skip the painful cold start phase entirely by just aggressively piggybacking on your own previous success.
That is the absolute ultimate goal for any founder. to eventually evolve from just a single product into a massive underlying platform where you can basically launch new distinct networks almost at will.
We have covered a truly massive amount of ground here today. I want to try to clearly synthesize all of this into a tangible, actionable playbook for the listener right now.
Hmm.
If you are sitting there today staring at a blank whiteboard trying to start a brand new movement or a marketplace platform, what are the actual chronological steps you need to take?
Let us try to boil it all down into a clear sequence.
Okay, step one. Do not try to boil the ocean on day one.
Correct. You have to strictly identify your core atomic network. Ask yourself, what is the absolute smallest possible version of this idea that actually functions and provides real value? Is it isolated to one single city, one specific college campus, one small corporate team? Define those strict boundaries immediately.
Step two is executing the actual cold start strategy.
Right. Pick your specific gritty tactic to manually ignite the fuse. Are you going to deeply employ the niche strategy, like Airbnb did with the design conferences? Are you going to heavily financially incentivize the hard side like Uber did by paying idle drivers? Or are you just going to resort to pure manual flintstoning and do all the unscalable work yourself?
Step three is to definitively prove the value proposition.
You have to relentlessly push that tiny atomic network until it hits critical mass. You must ensure the core product is undeniably working and providing massive value for that very small initial group before you even think about expanding.
Step four is the major pivot to science.
Once organic growth actually starts, you must immediately implement your rigorous data dashboard. You need to religiously watch your LTV, your blended CAC, and especially your churn rate. You are actively looking for that mathematical tipping point where the unit economics finally start to permanently work in your favor.
Step five is aggressively building the defensive moat.
You have to deliberately foster a deep sense of community. You need to engineer self-sustaining growth loops where your highly engaged existing users naturally and cheaply bring in your new users.
And finally, step six, scaling responsibly.
Which means employing heavy algorithmic curation and relentless product innovation to fight off the inevitable wave of spam and noise, keeping the core network valuable even as it gets overwhelmingly huge.
You know, it sounds so perfectly clean and linear when we summarize it like that, but we both know the reality is incredibly messy and stressful.
Oh, it is violently messy in practice, but having this clear mental map is crucial. It at least helps you understand exactly where you are standing while you are lost in the jungle.
I really want to leave our listeners today with a final thought, maybe a bit of a provocation to chew on. We have spent an hour talking extensively about overcoming the cold start, but based on our later discussion about scaling the massive noise, the desperate need for heavy algorithms, is there possibly such a thing as a cold stop problem?
Oh, that is interesting. Expand on what you mean by that.
Well, we are currently watching these massive legacy networks, like the original version of Facebook, or perhaps Twitter, which is now X, seemingly reaching a strange point where they almost start to freeze up.
Yeah.
They're so incredibly massive that nobody actually wants to post anything personal anymore because the context collapse is just way too high. I mean, I do not want to share a silly photo of my dog if I know my current boss, my ex-girlfriend, and some random angry political troll are all going to see it simultaneously.
That is a deeply profound point. You are describing the ultimate dark side of network effects. When a network becomes too hyperconnected, it ironically becomes entirely hostile to actual human intimacy.
Right. So what happens? People instinctively retreat. They flee to private group chats, to hidden Discord servers, to much smaller gated private networks where they feel safe again.
Which is fascinating because that essentially completely resets the entire clock. We are systematically abandoning the massive global town square and fleeing right back to the tiny, tight-knit niche. The cycle literally begins all over again.
So maybe the actual future of tech is not just building one giant monolithic network that connects literally everyone on Earth. Maybe the future is a fragmented landscape of millions of tiny overlapping atomic networks.
I honestly think Andrew Chen and a lot of top investors would strongly agree that the cultural pendulum is rapidly swinging back in that exact direction right now. The golden era of the one single social network to rule them all might actually be permanently ending.
That is absolutely something serious to chew on. If you are out there actively building something right now, maybe you really do not need to chase a billion users. Maybe you just need to find the absolute right 10,000 people and serve them perfectly.
I will take a highly profitable, deeply engaged, tiny niche over a massive, noisy, completely empty ghost town any day of the week.
Amen to that. Thank you all for joining us for this extensive deep dive into the dynamics of starting and scaling networks. We really hope you managed to find the critical signal hidden in all the noise today.
Keep hustling and keep lighting those fuses.
We will see you all next time.